PBMs. Medicare prescription drug plans hire PBMs to manage Part D benefits. In Medicaid, state-managed care organizations also employ PBMs. We know that drug companies set the list price. Our February hearing with CEOs of major manufacturers focused on those high prices. We now, today, turn our attention to PBMs. These organizations negotiate with the drug companies as well as pharmacies to arrive at a price for a drug and its ultimate cost. This system of private entities negotiating is what I envisioned as an author of Part D program of Medicare. I still believe that this is absolutely the right approach. I oppose any effort to undo the non-interference clause currently in the statute. However, as this hearing indicates, it's our duty to understand how the system is working today and what we can do to improve it. In addition to negotiating prices, PBMs also determine what drugs are covered and what patients pay out of pocket. Despite this vast influence over what often amounts to life or death, many consumers have very little insight into the workings of PBMs. PBMs report rebates and other price concessions to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. But the statute severely restricts what can be done with that information. More transparency is needed. The current system is so opaque that it's easy to see why there are many questions about PBM's motives and practices. One question we must ask is whether or not PBMs prefer a high-cost drug with big rebates over a cheaper drug. Some even argue that PBMs force drug companies to raise their list price. Senator Wyden and I are investigating pricing and rebating practices related to insulin. This will help us more broadly determine whether PBMs and manufacturers today are focused on patients or their own bottom line. Mergers and vertical integration is another area that has increasingly prompted concern. All of the PBMs here today are owned by or affiliated with an insurance plan. In many cases, the combined company also owns pharmacies and other players in the health industry. It's important to look to see whether such integration actually helps patients and consumers or whether it just opens the door for anti-competitive activity. Last year, I sent a letter to the Federal Trade Commission, a letter on this very issue, and asked them to keep me apprised of their work. I'm putting my letter and the response in the record without objection. That will be included. I've realized that I've raised many issues. I look forward to hearing what the witnesses have to say, providing insight and helping us find solutions. Ranking Member Wyden and I are committed to working on a bipartisan basis to bring down the cost of drugs. Our next step is to work with committee members to develop policies to help Medicare and Medicaid patients and to protect the taxpayers. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to pick up right where you left off because, as you've noted, this is a bipartisan effort to end this pharmaceutical price gouging that does so much harm to American consumers and to our taxpayers. And I think we all understand that there is a lot of heavy lifting to do in the days ahead. And at the same time, I want to note that the committee has already begun to put some points on the board. Just last week, the Congress passed our bipartisan legislation Chairman and I worked on for months to stop a blatant ripoff where big pharmaceutical companies were fleecing Medicaid and taxpayers. Now, this morning, the committee is going to be looking at one of the most confounding, gnarled riddles in American healthcare today. Pharmaceutical benefit managers are among the most profitable companies in America. What these pharmaceutical benefit managers actually do to rake in all of these profits is a mystery. The deals they strike with drug makers and insurers are a mystery. How much they're pocketing out of the rebates they negotiate is a mystery. With Americans learning about schemes like spread pricing in Medicaid, whether pharmaceutical benefit managers bring any real value to taxpayers is a mystery. The pharmaceutical benefit managers are supposed to be negotiators who get a better deal, a fairer shake for the consumer on prescription drugs. What they actually are middlemen who are raking in these profits while the drug prices soar into the stratosphere. As most people will tell you, as I hear at town hall meetings continually, most Americans think that there are already too many middlemen taking a big, juicy cut out of the American healthcare system. Just a little bit of history and some basic facts. Pharmaceutical benefit managers first showed up decades ago, back when prescription drugs were being utilized more extensively. The PBMs told the insurance companies, we're the ones who know drug pricing. We'll handle the negotiations for you. But there is little evidence that these pharmaceutical benefit managers have actually held down the prices in a meaningful way. In fact, most of the evidence shows just the opposite. Pharmaceutical benefit managers actually make more money when they pick a higher priced drug over a lower priced drug. Colleagues, let's remember that all the way through this discussion. Benefit managers make more money when they pick a higher priced drug over a lower priced drug. The logic on this isn't exactly complicated graduate level economics. PBM profits are based on taking their slice of the prescription drug pie. More expensive drugs means there's a bigger pie. When there's a bigger pie, bigger slices for the pharmaceutical benefit managers. I've been looking at this issue extensively, as has the chairman, and I'm of the view that pharmaceutical benefit managers guard their operations with greater secrecy than HBO is guarding the ending of Game of Thrones. Now, we know there's never been more outrage in the country over the cost of rising medicine. And I say that looking all the way back to my days when I was director of the Gray Panthers. If PBMs had clear, hard evidence proving that they're getting patients a better deal on prescription drugs, they'd be leafleting the countryside and shouting it from the rooftops. Instead, they work overtime to keep patients and taxpayers in the dark. Today, the committee is going to get 1,000 different versions of the same talking point. We're all about getting the best possible price for patients. But based on what I've seen so far, we're not getting actual proof. The bottom line is pharmaceutical benefit managers are middlemen who strike deals with drug makers in secret. In my experience, that kind of negotiation rarely results in an act of charity for consumers and taxpayers. Now, because of our jurisdiction, I just want to close with a few specifics with respect to the federal health programs. First, on Medicaid, a PBM scheme known as spread pricing to rip off taxpayers through Medicaid has set off alarm bells in the states from one end of the country to another. It's got nothing to do with, cream cheese, all this spread pricing. But here's how it works. The PBMs pay one set price to pharmacies for a particular drug, but then they turn around and charge Medicaid and other healthcare payers far more for the same prescription. The chairman and I are digging into this, so this will continue our bipartisan efforts. We've asked the Health Department Inspector General to take a look. If there are changes that can be made to clamp down on this exploitation of Medicare, I think it's important we consider it. The chairman and I are looking into it. It's as clear a middleman ripoff as you're going to find. Now, with respect to Medicare, some key issues. First, Part D is one of the few health benefits in America that does not have an out-of-pocket cap. That means seniors with catastrophic illnesses can face costs of thousands and thousands of dollars. These are folks on fixed incomes. This is a flaw that needs to be fixed, and I have introduced the RX cap to protect seniors in our country from having to pay more and more out-of-pocket for their medicine. Next, Medicare Part D encourages drug makers and PBMs to push seniors onto more expensive drugs. That's because after a certain amount of spending on drugs, seniors in Medicare are on the hook for 85% of the cost. After that point, PBMs pay only 15%. Drug makers are just home free. So it's good business for the drug industry when seniors cross that threshold as fast as possible. Second, rebates are working against the seniors who need the benefit most. Drug rebates in Part D get sent straight to the insurance companies. In theory, they use the rebates to lower premiums, which sounds good if you're healthy. It's not such a good deal for seniors who battle illnesses. The amounts they pay for their prescriptions are based on list prices, not on the prices factoring in rebates. Again, I've introduced legislation, the See-Through Act, so that patients can finally see whether these rebates are worth the trade-off, and my understanding is that there's progress on this in the House of Representatives as well. The administration has proposed new rules having to do with this topic as well. I continue to be concerned that the Trump approach could produce a windfall for the drug companies and that the administration is unprepared to take the next steps to rein in the pharmaceutical companies and bring down lists. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate very much that we're pursuing this in a bipartisan way. You mentioned insulin. Mentioned our new effort with respect to Medicaid and so-called spread pricing. Colleagues, we've got to move with urgency. 2019 is the year to get this done. We all know that 2020, there are going to be a couple things going on in America in 2020. So let's continue with a sense of urgency and get this done in 2019 and stop the price gouging. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wyden, and thank you for your cooperation on this and several other issues as we try to do things in a bipartisan way. So first of all, in the introduction of these witnesses, I should not only say thank you for being here today to discuss an important topic, but I want to thank you. As far as I know, I haven't heard anything negative from staff. You came here without a lot of hassle, and we've had some witnesses on this subject that it was quite a hassle to get them here. So thank you for your cooperation. We're grateful for that. First is Dr. Steve Miller, Cigna Chief Clinical Officer, and leads all the company's clinical policies, quality, and performance efforts. Derica Rice, Executive Vice President for CVS Health and also President of CVS Caremark, the company's pharmacy benefit management business. William Fleming, Dr. Fleming is Segment President, Healthcare Services, where he's responsible for Humana's clinical and pharmacy business. John Prince currently serves as Chief Executive Officer of OptumRx. Finally, Mike Kolar, he currently serves as Interim President and CEO of Prime Therapeutics. So we'll start with Mr. Miller and go from my left to my right. I know that all of you have more to say than 5 minutes will allow. So say for all of you, a longer statement will be very much appreciated and will be put in the record. So go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify and for your interest and leadership on these important topics. I'm Dr. Steve Miller, Executive Vice President and Chief Clinical Officer at Cigna. From 2005 to 2018, I served as Senior Vice President and Chief Medical Officer at Express Scripts. I'm a kidney doctor by training. I work in this industry by choice. As a nephrologist, I could help one patient at a time. In my current role, I can help over 100 million Americans achieve better health with greater choice, affordability, and predictability. When I started practicing medicine, patients diagnosed with cancer were most likely to undergo surgery to treat their condition. Since then, pharmaceutical companies have discovered and developed innovative medicines that have transformed care, leading to cures for previously untreatable conditions. Now the preferred treatment for cancer patients and patients with many other diagnoses is increasingly prescription drug therapy before surgery. Accordingly, prescription drug spending has become the fastest growing portion of total medical expenditures. Innovations can yield exciting, life-changing new therapies and treatments that improve or extend life. But innovation in the pharmaceutical sector often comes with a high price tag. At Cigna, we're focused on accelerating solutions that support both innovation and price stability. Express Scripts has a range of world-class capabilities that enhance clinical quality, reduce costs, and improve or accelerate access to therapies. These include specialty pharmacy care and distribution, formulary management, medical and drug data analytics, and patient care services. We employ hundreds of nurses and thousands of pharmacists who deliver life-saving drugs to patients, make sure patients know how to use them, and ensure that the treatment is working. The coordination of care is a huge part of what we do and what makes my job so rewarding. Thousands of health plans, unions, government plans, and employers, including many pharmaceutical companies, trust us to manage the pharmacy and medical benefits of millions of Americans. Our clients are sophisticated purchasers who demand value and innovation from us every day. We deliver safer, more affordable medicine, provide specialized care with tailored solutions, including specialized pharmacists with deep understanding of specific disease states. We negotiate discounts for prescription drugs so that the innovations created by the biopharmaceutical industry can be accessed by all. For example, 4 years ago, our society faced a challenge, treating patients with hepatitis C. A cure was developed that had an extraordinary price tag of $1,000 per tablet for 84 pills. That meant for the first time, a curative treatment was going to be reserved for only the sickest patients. The situation was unacceptable, and Express Scripts worked to solve it. We did this by driving competition between clinically similar products and innovating to guarantee adherence. In the first year, we treated 50,000 patients to cure, achieved higher adherence than the drug's clinical trial, and saved patients and health systems over $1 billion. But we have more work to do. Approximately 90% of all prescriptions we fill are generics, and there are some cases where generics are not an option. The remaining 10% are branded drugs, which represent 70% of the spend on prescription drugs. We believe there are targeted solutions to address this 70%. We work to do this through sophisticated, evidence-based negotiations for clinically equivalent therapies. For example, over 7 million Americans diagnosed with diabetes use insulin. For some patients, the increasing price of insulin limits access and adherence. When Cigna and Express Scripts announced the merger, we clearly stated that we would improve choice, affordability, and predictability. Within the first 100 days of our combination with Cigna, we announced a patient assurance program which will cap the cost at $25 a month for patients who take insulin. This is just one example of private sector innovations and solutions aligning incentives in the financing and delivery of care. Cigna is excited to do our part. We look forward to working with the Committee on Solutions ensuring that drugs are affordable for all Americans. We have highlighted proposals in our submitted testimony, but I'll mention a few. We recommend improving price transparency tools for patients and physicians at the point of prescribing and prioritizing public policy that speeds biosimilars and generics to market. We recommend the administration move forward with proposals to introduce more private market tools into Medicare Part B and Part D programs. I welcome the opportunity to discuss these recommendations and issues and look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Rice.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to join you today. My name is Derica Rice, and I'm an Executive Vice President at CVS Health and also President of CVS Caremark. I joined CVS Health because I believe in the company's vision of helping patients on their path to better health. We want to make health care more accessible, more affordable, and improve health outcomes for the communities that we serve. Never has our work been more important than today. The rising cost of health care and prescription drugs affects every household in this nation and are a critical issue for consumers and policymakers. Our job is to work with the employers, unions, and government programs we serve to ensure that when their members get to the pharmacy counter, they get the medicines that they need at the lowest possible cost. As drug prices increase and consumers shoulder more of the burden, we believe we can and must do more to deliver affordable care. In the spirit of our common goal of reducing healthcare costs for consumers and the overall system, I am here to share what we, as CVS Caremark, are doing to directly reduce consumers' out-of-pocket costs at the pharmacy counter and to discuss policies that would help further advance that agenda. Our goal as a PBM is simple: to reduce costs and improve health outcomes. We do this by negotiating discounts with manufacturers, designing formularies that encourage the use of generics and biosimilars, and creating new tools to help bring escalating drug prices under control. Some of the new tools we've put to work for our employees and our clients include point-of-sale rebates at the pharmacy counter that directly lower out-of-pocket costs, in particular during the deductible phase. Currently, almost 10 million of our clients' members are in plans offering these savings. The first and only Medicare Part D plan offering point-of-sale rebates through our SilverScript Allure plan, which leaves the choice to the individual beneficiaries as to what plan best serves their needs. We provide $0 copays as preventive medications for chronic conditions to our employees, and we have redoubled our efforts to encourage our clients to do the same. Our hard work has had a real impact. Over the last 3 years, we have saved our clients and their members $141 billion in drug costs. At the same time, in 2018 alone, 44% of our clients saw their net prescription drug prices decline, and 85% of our members utilizing their prescription benefit spent less than $300 on their prescriptions. We recently announced our guaranteed net cost pricing model, a new pricing option that provides our clients with a guaranteed price for retail, mail, and specialty drug products, regardless of product or price inflation. This heightens our focus on the lowest actual cost of the drug, and 100% of the rebates are passed through. As we've interacted with consumers, they have told us that they want to know whether their drug is covered and what their out-of-pocket costs are going to be. So we now provide member-specific information in the doctor's office, at the pharmacy counter, and directly to consumers on their phones and online. We call this real-time benefits. That means prescribers can see the actual cost of the drug to the member or patient based on their current coverage and up to 5 potentially lower cost options, enabling them to make informed decisions and help patients save money while improving their care. But as much as we've been able to accomplish, we also understand that more must be done. We support the FDA's focus on bringing more lower-cost alternatives to market faster. As I've detailed at length in my written testimony, we also support many of the policies authored by members of this committee, including Chairman Grassley's and Ranking Member Wyden's policies that would bring more competition to the market and limit out-of-pocket expenses for seniors. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I am happy to answer any questions.
Fleming's turn.
Good morning, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and for your leadership in creating and advancing Part D. I've spent my career in a variety of pharmacist roles, and today I lead Humana's clinical organization, including pharmacy, home health, and behavioral health. We provide Medicare Part D coverage to approximately 8.4 million seniors. I am passionate about improving health outcomes, and I appreciate the committee examining the root causes of high drug costs, advancing policy solutions, and gaining a deeper understanding of what integrated health plans do. Today, more than 43 million seniors are covered by Part D. The program was designed to leverage market competition to provide affordable access to prescription drug coverage. The private market has responded to that construct by creating competition that has resulted in generic dispensing rates greater than 90%, stable premiums through 13 years of the program averaging around $30 per month, and beneficiary satisfaction rates of nearly 90%. And our efforts have not just been on the negotiation side. The majority of our employees develop and manage patient engagement programs, as well as advance the interoperability between Humana and doctors, as well as with pharmacies. For example, we have a tool called IntelligentRx, which provides actionable information to doctors at the time of prescribing. By linking information on formulary coverage and costs into the electronic medical record right into the physician's workflow, the doctor and her patient can have a holistic discussion about the patient's needs. Part D is working incredibly well for the majority of seniors, but we have a rising tide of high-cost specialty drugs driving unsustainable costs for seniors and taxpayers. $50,000 to $100,000 treatments did not exist in 2003 when Part D was signed into law. Today, it's common for new innovations. In 2018, 2% of our members used specialty drugs that comprise 36% of our total Part D spending. In 2 years, we project it could rise to nearly 50%. Nearly 1 of every 2 specialty drugs results in members entering catastrophic coverage on their very first fill. As we approach the 2020 coverage year, we anticipate the Part D rebate model will be changed to one where the rebates that manufacturers are willing to offer will be applied at point of sale. This regulatory action will have mixed results. All beneficiaries will pay higher premiums, while 12% will see savings of greater than $70 per year. 5% will see savings of less than $70 per year. 83% will pay higher total cost given the premium increases. There are numerous moving pieces associated with such a tremendous policy change. While we are still reviewing, we are encouraged by CMS's announcement last Friday addressing one of our key implementation concerns. And we will continue working with HHS and CMS to identify additional opportunities to minimize beneficiary disruption and to create sustainability and competition. The rebate rule does not solve the drug affordability problem. To truly protect beneficiaries from high drug costs and to ensure sustainability in Part D, we would encourage the committee to explore policy ideas modernizing the benefit. At a high level, this could mean placing limits on out-of-pocket costs, creating a special funding mechanism for today's high-cost specialty drugs, including new flexibilities for Part D plan design, such as options for beneficiaries on high-cost specialty drugs or dually eligible Medicaid and Medicare beneficiaries. We also strongly encourage Congress to continue evolving FDA and patent policy to create competition. Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee, I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of OptumRx, a pharmacy care services company, whose dedicated employees work to ensure the people we serve have affordable access to the drugs they need. Our team includes 5,000 licensed pharmacists and pharmacy technicians who help patients learn how to take their medications, avoid harmful drug interactions, and manage their chronic conditions. Our nurses infuse life-saving drugs in patients' homes. Our pharmacists serve behavioral health patients in 450 community mental health centers and federally qualified health centers. Our opioid program is helping lower overprescribing of opioids, promoting compliance with CDC prescribing guidelines, and advancing the use of medication-assisted therapies to reduce opioid dependency. OptumRx's services increase medication adherence, which in turn reduces unnecessary ER visits and hospitalizations and improves consumer health. We also manage pharmacy benefits on behalf of employer, union, commercial, and government customers. We achieve savings by designing drug benefits that promote clinically effective drugs at the lowest possible cost. As a result, we're reducing annual drug costs on average by $1,600 per person per client. This starts with a clinical assessment by our Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee, comprised of independent pharmacists and physicians. They evaluate formulary placement based on scientific evidence about a drug's efficacy and comparative effectiveness, not cost. The meetings are open and transparent to our customers. Cost only becomes a factor after this independent committee has identified clinically effective drugs in a therapeutic class. If a lower net cost generic or biosimilar exists, we prefer it on our formularies, which is why about 90% of the prescription claims we administer are for generics. If there's no generic or biosimilar option, or more than one brand or biologic drug in a class, we negotiate meaningful discounts for manufacturers and prefer the drug with the lowest overall cost on our formularies. Approximately 98% of the discounts we negotiate go to our customers. We know consumers have felt the manufacturer's list price increases in the form of higher out-of-pocket costs. We've heard the call for action, and we've taken action to make sure consumers directly benefit from the savings we're negotiating. Last year, we dramatically increased the availability of the discounts at the pharmacy counter for millions of eligible consumers, who are now saving on average $130 per eligible prescription. In 2020, all new employer-sponsored plans we serve will provide discounts to their members at the pharmacy counter. But more needs to be done. Manufacturers continue to increase their list and net prices at unsustainable rates because the lack of meaningful competition allows them to. List prices have increased on 20 most prescribed brand drugs for seniors by an average of 12% for each of the past 5 years. Prices for specialty drugs in particular are spiraling out of control. Less than 2% of Americans take up a specialty drug, yet those drugs will make up half of the total drug spending by 2022. Manufacturers also engage in anti-competitive practices, such as pay-for-delay deals, evergreening their patents. A recent study found that 78% of drugs associated with new patents were not new drugs, but just extensions of existing ones. So-called authorized generics are not a solution. They're not generics. They are a tactic used by manufacturers to give the appearance of competition, but they do not lower overall cost. Real solutions will reform the patent system, promote competition, and lower cost. These include passing the CREATES Act, prohibiting pay-for-delay deals, restricting evergreening of patents, accelerating biosimilar treatment options, and reducing the exclusivity period for drugs. We also need to drive meaningful value-based payment models for drugs, just as happening throughout the healthcare system. With reforms that promote competition and value-based payments, we will all get far more value for our considerable investment in prescription drugs. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today. The 28,000 women and men of OptumRx are committed to doing our part to make sure prescription drugs are more affordable. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Mr. Kolar.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss how pharmacy benefit managers and Prime Therapeutics provide value to the healthcare system. I'm Mike Kolar, and I serve as the interim president and CEO of Prime. At Prime, we make healthcare work better by helping people get the medicine they need to feel better and live well. We do this by ensuring that plan members get the medication most appropriate for their condition at a cost that is the most affordable in the context of their overall insurance benefit. Prime is a unique PBM. We are owned and controlled by 18 not-for-profit Blue Plan clients. We are focused on driving savings for these plans instead of margins. Our business model is based upon delivering the lowest net cost on prescription medicines and the lowest overall cost of care for the benefit of our plans and ultimately their members. Getting the right drug for the right patient at the right time at a cost as affordable as possible in the context of their insurance benefit helps to ensure sustainability and optimal health outcomes. We appreciate the committee's efforts to examine the problem of high drug prices. We see firsthand the challenges that these high costs cause for plans, members, and taxpayers every day. Prime and PBMs are often misperceived as transactional middlemen. This entirely ignores the immense value we bring by using deep pharmacy expertise to ensure clinically appropriate drug use and to drive improved safety, quality, outcomes, and savings. While high prices are and should remain a central issue in this discussion, it is important to acknowledge the impact of our clinical expertise in ensuring appropriate utilization, resulting in lower costs for plans and individual members. As a client-owned PBM, our business is built upon transparency, and we understand the importance of transparency in the healthcare system. Our model encompasses full client transparency and meaningful, actionable pharmacy, provider, and patient transparency. We believe that transparency to the right parties for the right reasons can improve our healthcare system and lower costs. Rebates and the role they play have been key areas of focus in the drug cost debate. In our view, rebates are a powerful tool to offset high prices, which are set by pharmaceutical companies and pharmaceutical companies alone. The fact that rebates are not offered on many of the highest cost drugs and that studies show no correlation between prices and rebates underscore that rebates are a key to mitigating rather than causing high drug prices. We pass rebates through fully to our plans, and we believe our plans should be able to choose how to apply these rebates in ways that best serve their members and market needs by balancing premiums and cost sharing. This is particularly true since the majority of commercial members we serve do not face high coinsurance or high deductibles. Nevertheless, we are proud to offer our plans a commercial point-of-sale rebate solution to provide pricing relief where appropriate. We are also strong proponents of value-based contracting. We use these programs to align the interests of manufacturers, payers, and patients by tying reimbursement to quality, outcomes, and value. We agree that high drug prices must be addressed, and we support necessary inquiry and change. We believe that opportunities for meaningful improvement lie in increasing competition and in greater use of proven clinical tools to drive down costs. Pharmaceutical competition allows us to use our clinical expertise to add value and produce savings. However, patent abuses and restrictions on formularies and utilization management result in less competition and higher costs. We support efforts to correct these market imbalances. We appreciate the committee's interest in our perspective on drug prices, the role that we play in lowering drug costs for plans and members, and policy initiatives that can provide solutions to the drug cost problem. We believe that all parts of the drug supply chain should be carefully studied and considered in evaluating possible solutions. And we are committed to working with you to help bring lower costs to the most important stakeholder in this conversation, the patient. We look forward to answering the questions you have regarding these issues. Thank you.
Compliment all of you for staying within the 5 minutes, and I'm sure all of you have put in a longer statement, and we will take all of that into consideration as well. I'm picking my first questions for Rice, Prince, and Miller for the reasons that you're the largest with us. We all agree that seniors are sensitive to premium prices. When you negotiate drug prices with plans, is a premium impact for beneficiaries considered? Start with Mr. Rice.
Yes.
Okay, and then Mr. Prince.
When we negotiate, we focus on the lowest net cost for that drug.
Does that say that the consumer is taken into consideration, or is that
Yes, absolutely.
one and the same?
Consumers take it into consideration, so they pay the lowest price.
And Mr. Miller?
Most definitely.
Yeah. Now, to the same three people, without rebates, so forget rebates, what tool do you have to keep drug prices and premiums low? I'll start with Mr. Rice.
Senator, we use a number of different tools. As you heard me articulate in my opening remarks, we negotiate with manufacturers. Putting rebates to the side, we provide point-of-sale rebates in order to provide benefits to the consumer at the counter to keep their out-of-pocket costs low. We provide formulary and clinical program management, which improves adherence for members, and we know that this downstream, through that improved adherence, it saves medical costs downstream. And you also heard me reference in my remarks that we also provide what we call real-time benefits to bring visibility both to the clinicians and physicians as well as the patients as to what the lowest possible cost options are for them given their specific plan designs in order to make sure health care is affordable and accessible for them.
Yeah. So, Mr. Prince, the extent to which you do some of the same things, say that, and then whatever else you do that he didn't cover.
Sure. In terms of the value we deliver, we save our clients about $1,600 per person in value each year, and that's driven other things that we do. Our negotiations with retail pharmacies, we have 67,000. We negotiate a better price for our consumers. We do other types of drug utilization review, but if you lost the tool for some type of mechanism for controlling for rebates, that would actually take a lot of value out of the system and increase cost.
Okay, Mr. Miller.
Yeah.
Or Dr. Miller.
Much of the same. Remember that we prefer generics. So most of the time, in fact, 90% of the dispenses we have are for generic products, and that's one of the greatest tools to help lower costs. But really important is the coordination of care. If the patient's not taking the drug, we're not getting the medical benefit. And so helping those patients identify gaps in care, fill those gaps, and be able to make sure their drugs are working appropriately is crucial to the success of treating the patient.
Okay. And on the next question, so I'm going to concentrate on the same three people. I'd like to talk about consolidation, including the recent integration of PBMs with insurance companies. Last year, I wrote the Justice Department on the issues. It reported that the three largest PBMs who are before us today now cover 71% of Medicaid, Medicare Part D enrollees, and 86% of standalone drug plan enrollees. Such market power raises questions. So the first question, I want to hear briefly from each of you whether PBM industry is competitive. For examples, are there high barriers to entry for new competitors? And I think that's an important point, but you don't have to just concentrate on high barriers. Let's go with Dr. Miller.
Yeah, thank you. So the consolidation of the industry is actually in an effort to really take better care of patients. By looking at total cost of care across medical and pharmacy, we believe we can do an even better job of controlling costs and improving care. As far as barrier to entry, this is actually a wildly competitive marketplace with over 60 players. People buy based on their needs. Some people want to use a regional player or a local player. Some people want to use a national player, and there's plenty of selection of all.
Senator, this is a highly competitive space. In addition to the three that you've pointed out here, I think CMS has noted there's over 60 PBMs across the U.S. So therefore, the competition, there's many options for the employers that are out there, government entities as well as unions, to choose from given their specific needs. And we've seen that play out in terms of each of us trying to get to, for our clients and their members, their patients, to the lowest possible cost we can to keep premiums low and out-of-pocket costs burdens low as well.
And then Mr. Prince.
Senator, I'd say the market is very competitive. Every time we go out to a bid, there's at least 3 to 5 other competitors in the market. Our clients are very sophisticated. They use complicated spreadsheets to evaluate the clinical value and the cost effectiveness of a proposal. They have outside advisors that help them in that process. When you get to the broader market, there are dozens of other competitors, especially as you get into the mid-sized employers. So it's a very competitive market with a lot of pricing pressure.
Okay, Senator Wyden.
Thank you. Gentlemen, when I'm home, what Oregonians tell me is that the whole system is just rigged against them. And they look at the drug companies, the middlemen, the insurance companies, and they say they're just a bunch of healthcare corporations scratching each other's backs and keeping our prices up and taking advantage of us. And all of you as pharmaceutical benefit managers consistently say, this is your message, you bring value and fight for the lowest price. So I'm going to use a couple of examples to try to see how that works in the real world. Amgen manufactures a brand name cholesterol drug that's very expensive. I've covered my concerns with high list prices with them. They recently launched an identical version of the drug that costs 60% less than the original. Now, here is a copy of a prior authorization form that CVS requires doctors to fill out if the doctor wants to prescribe a cheaper version of this cholesterol drug. I'm going to ask unanimous consent to enter this document into the record. The CVS form says, and I quote, the two products are the exact same and they're made in the same manufacturing facility, but they ask the doctor to answer detailed questions about the patient's medical history. Mr. Rice, why is CVS, based on this form, putting arbitrary barriers between patients and cheaper medicine? Is it because you get a bigger rebate on a more expensive drug?
Senator, I understand your question, and the short answer is absolutely not. What you may find is that in many cases, the highest list price drug or the lowest list price drug in the particular example you cite may not be the absolute lowest cost drug. So what we tend to do is we look at the drug's cost after all discounts have been taken into account, because that then is what allows members to keep out-of-pocket costs low, as well as the plans to keep their premiums low for their members. And in that particular scenario, the branded drug was still the lowest cost drug.
So you're making the argument the consumer somehow, by your analysis, wins on net price. Is that the argument you're making?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. To me, that answer is a prime example of our broken drug system favoring the big corporations rather than patients. At the pharmacy counter anywhere in America, patients pay cost sharing based off the list price. And my view is, we'll talk to you some more about it, it sure looks, when I use that form and I hear your answer, it sure looks to me like you all are taking deliberate actions to pad your bottom line at the expense of patients. Now, Mr. Prince, a question for you because time is short. A February 11th, 2019 article describes letters United sent to several drug manufacturers late last year and early this year. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask unanimous consent to enter that article into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Prince, the letters demanded that drug manufacturers give United almost 2 years' notice if they intend to lower prices, giving manufacturers, again, an easy excuse to keep list prices high. Even more galling is United demanded that these lower prices would not diminish the rebates United receives. The letters say United should receive equivalent rebates off the lower prices. So, Mr. Prince, you all argue, PBMs, that drug prices set by manufacturers need to come down. But in private, United seems only to care about the size of their rebate and when their bottom line might take a hit. Mr. Prince, do you have any agreements with drug manufacturers similar to this letter that penalizes the drug manufacturers if they choose to lower their price?
So, Senator, regarding that letter that was sent out in December of last year, it was intended to make sure that our clients, we worked with a dozen Part D plans, and we wanted to make sure that when they put their bids, they understood what would be the rebate amounts so that they could enter a bid accurately. As you know how the Part D program works, you have to submit your bid in June of 1 year for the next seven months.
My time is short. The question was, do you have any agreements with the drug manufacturers similar to this letter that penalizes the drug manufacturers if they choose to lower their price? That's yes or no.
We strongly encourage people to lower list price. We support lowering list price.
I'd like to see any agreements. My time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cornyn, before Senator Cornyn's time starts, there's going to be a vote. I thought it'd start right now. So we're going to keep this meeting going, and while I'm gone, Senator Cassidy's going to control the time. Senator Cornyn.
Gentlemen, in our meetings in my office and elsewhere, I've told you we're trying to understand some of the basic features of the contracts between the manufacturers and the PBMs and how those relate to the consumer. So I'd like to ask 5 questions and to establish some basic facts about how your companies operate. And if possible, I'd like for you to answer yes or no, just so we can establish some basic facts. We can come back for further explanation in some format or another. I'm not trying to cut you off, but I am trying to work within the guidelines and the time we have today. So does your company structure an agreement where rebates and fees are a percentage of list price? Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Dr. Fleming?
Yes, it's wholesale acquisition cost.
Mr. Prince?
No for Medicare, no for Medicaid, no for generics, and we pass on 98% in the commercial.
Mr. Kolar? Yes. Second question is, has your company proposed in a contract or otherwise prohibited or penalized a manufacturer from decreasing the price of a drug?
No.
Dr. Miller? Mr. Rice?
Absolutely not.
Dr. Fleming?
Absolutely not.
Mr. Prince?
No.
Mr. Kolar?
No, we welcome lower prices.
Third question, has your company proposed in a contract or otherwise demanded that manufacturers give advance notice of a price decrease? I think this may relate to some of what the ranking member was asking. Let me ask that again. Has your company proposed in a contract or otherwise demanded that manufacturers give advance notice of a price decrease? Dr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Rice?
No.
Dr. Fleming?
No.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Mr. Kolar?
No.
Fourth question, has your company proposed in a contract or otherwise demanded that manufacturers pay a higher fee or rebate if list prices do not increase above a certain percentage in that contract year? Dr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Rice?
No.
Dr. Fleming?
No.
Mr. Prince?
No.
Mr. Kolar?
No.
Finally, has your company proposed in a contract or otherwise demanded that manufacturers pay a certain rebate amount even if they decrease their list price? Dr. Miller?
The manufacturer is required to continue to pay the rebate until renegotiation.
So that would be a yes?
Yes.
Mr. Rice?
We focus on what the manufacturers getting to the lowest possible cost, whether it's rebates or if they can reduce the list even further below the fully discounted value.
Is that a yes or a no? Has your
Could you
company
repeat?
proposed in a contract or otherwise demanded that manufacturers pay a certain rebate amount even if they decrease their list price?
Not that I'm aware of.
Dr. Fleming?
Not that I'm aware of. Most of our discounts are a percentage of wholesale acquisition cost.
Mr. Prince?
For the specific case that was referenced, yes, but in general, 100%, it was only for the Part D program, and 100% of those rebates are passed on to CMS and to our consumers.
Mr. Kolar.
No, Senator, not that I'm aware of.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit a question for the record. I'll do it in writing to each of these gentlemen, but I want to give you warning ahead of time of what's coming so you can prepare. I'd like to know for each of you the total dollar amount that you obtain from pharmaceutical manufacturers in any form, such as rebates, fees, and the like. And secondly, what the total dollar amount that you remit to health plans is. We'll give you a chance to respond in writing, but I wanted to give them a fair notice at this hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Stabenow.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to each of you. Obviously, this is an incredibly important topic. You've each indicated fastest driver on healthcare costs, and certainly for families, for seniors, for individuals. Deep, deep concern. There was an issue that Michigan pharmacists brought to me a little over a year ago that we were able to successfully address on a bipartisan basis. My Know the Lowest Price Act was signed into law after it was clear that pharmacists were extremely concerned that people were walking into a pharmacy, handing over their insurance card, paying the copay, assumed it was the lowest price, and sometimes, in fact, the report showed 23% of the time the person could have gotten a lower price paying cash out of pocket, and yet the pharmacists couldn't tell people. So when we raised that, we heard basically from everybody that nobody did it. Yeah, it was just a few bad guys, nobody did it, and that in fact just a couple of bad actors, not a common practice. And so we were able to fix that. So my first question is, can you tell me if there are any other egregious anti-consumer PBM practices taking place anywhere in your industry like this that you would want to highlight today? Okay. So let me go on to the next question. So I'm assuming that's a no because no one responded. So let me go on and then talk about negotiation, talk about the various tools that you have to be able to bring down costs for people. And one of the main tools is negotiating. And I'm assuming, you know, when you look at the number of customers, it's about bulk purchase, being able to secure the best price, right? So when we look at Express Scripts has 100 million Americans covered, CVS 90 million, OptumRx 65 million, Prime Therapeutics 27 million, Humana 21 million. And yet Americans still pay the highest prices in the world, even though you are negotiating for millions of people. And so my question is, the VA has its own pharmacy benefit manager service. They negotiate for 9 million people, 9 million veterans, and they pay on average 40% less for the same drugs that the rest of the healthcare system pays for. Despite greater volume, you are unable to secure these kinds of low prices. With all due respect, you guys are pretty bad negotiators, given the fact that the VA can get 40% less. And so I'd like to know from each of you why that's the case. Dr. Miller?
Yes, so, you know, part of the equation is giving patients choice. And so at the VA, they actually limit their formulary more than any of us at this table do. And so oftentimes they'll have one beta blocker, one ACE inhibitor. And so if it's going to get to that level of choice, then we could get better prices also. But
let me also just jump in the interest of time. I know you create nationwide drug formularies, you have pre-authorization, you give preferred treatment status to certain medications. So you don't use any of those tools that the VA is using? Because you do.
Oh, we definitely use those tools, but we also give people choice. It's crucial for both physicians and patients to have the choice of the products they want to be able to access. And so many of our plans want us to have broad formularies. And so when you have more products, it means you move less market share and you can't.
So they get for 40% more. So basically 40% premium, you're saying. It gives them more choice. I mean, I'd like to ask people how much they would think that's a good trade-off given the cost of medicine today. And I would welcome the opportunity to look at the tools in detail that each of you have versus the VA, because with what I look at, it doesn't look to be that much different. But in interest of time, Mr. Rice.
Yes, Senator.
Any comments?
Yes, Senator. What we have seen is that when we're able to manage a more tightly formulary versus an unmanaged formulary, we can actually drive lower costs for the patients as well as for the cost to the plans. And we've seen through our own data that an unmanaged plan, which means it has an open formulary, it was being referenced, may have an average cost of $108 versus a managed plan may have a cost on average more closer to $88.
So would you support doing something like what the VA does in terms of how they manage their plans then? Is that what you're suggesting, that they have a more narrow focus and that would be better for consumers?
What I would support, Senator, is choice and optionality, and with our members and their respective clients, that's what we've provided, such that in our own case, if you take the example of our Med D plan for seniors, we provide a plan that can be as cheap as a premium of $30 all the way to a premium of $80, depending upon which choices those members think are best meets their specific needs. And that $80 premium begins to contemplate things like point-of-sale rebates.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And Mr. Chairman, I know that I'd like to hear from everyone else, but I do recognize that I am out of time, so I will follow up in writing with each of you. I do want to say, though, that Medicare does have 59 million beneficiaries, much less than many of you have as well, and I don't understand why they're not allowed to negotiate best price in terms of what's best for consumers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the chair and ranking member for holding this briefing. I want to emphasize that obviously one of the themes of today is about the lack of transparency, and that in the 2009 legislation I authored a PBM transparency provision that is current law. That is that this provision requires the PBMs to confidentially report information to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, including the total amount and types of rebates, discounts, price concessions that PBMs negotiate on behalf of insurance plans. So that information is somewhere in this government, and I would suggest that we work with Secretary Azar on that information, not that it can be made public, but that will give us what we need to see today, that we have a lack of direct negotiating ability, in my opinion, by states and other jurisdictions. I personally would give states better negotiating authority. I get that this is a business model for PBMs, but there's no reason why that business model has to exclude having other market competition. When I look at the fact that three PBMs have 85% of the market, or that the CVS-Aetna merger was opposed by the American Medical Association because it raised concerns about reduced competition, then my question is, why can't we induce more competition into this marketplace by allowing states to negotiate on behalf of various plans within their state? So I'm not asking for an answer to that. I already asked the drug companies. They think that's unfair. I'm pretty sure you're going to say the same thing, so I don't need to hear that answer. What we need to do is get the answers from Secretary Azar about what is currently happening in the marketplace and move forward with giving states the ability, or the federal government, to negotiate on price. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair calls no one else to call on. Now, I've thought a lot about your business model, and multiple times it was said that if you do a point-of-sale rebate, premiums will rise. Now, if you think about that, what that is saying is that those patients who actually need medications are the ones that are lowering the premiums for those who do not. Now, it's kind of a reverse Robin Hood. We're going to take from the sick and give to the well. Now, on the one hand, you could say that is just a business decision, But you could imagine that this could be manipulated, that the way to keep somebody with requiring expensive drugs off of your plan, maybe to get on their spouse's plan, would be to make them pay more. Now, I say that, I'm not accusing, I just can't help but reflect upon that. And so I want to then, can we show that second poster, please? This one is. Now, one thing I've noted, and again we've heard several times, that the amount of money PBM retained revenue on retail prescription drugs by source is, and this would be, the maroon would be that related to rebates, and this would be related to fees. And so the amount related to fees is increasing dramatically, and the amount related to rebates is decreasing. So one, it tells me that you seem to be passing more of these rebates on, or else getting fewer, less rebates. I suspect that more are being passed. But this is what concerns me, that 16.6 billion. So I think it was you, Mr. Rice, who said that the amount paid for drugs is flat or decreasing. Does that also include these other fees that might be related to the filling at the prescription? Is the fee, put differently, you probably understand what I'm asking, but just for the record, put differently, when you say the drug cost is remaining flat, is that everything included, including that which is charged at the pharmacy as a dispensing fee or any other fee which may be included, or is it merely the price of the medication itself?
It's all inclusive. We, Senator, we pass through 100% of all rebates.
Now, I'm not related to the rebates.
And fees to our clients on behalf of their members.
So if there is a DIR fee collected from the pharmacist, then that is rebated to the payor, even if not to the patient. So when you say, and the flat cost to the patient includes this increased amount of fees that are going into your business model.
Yes, Senator. In many of our cases with our clients today, they've progressed to what we call a transparent arrangement, which is there is no spread between the two.
Now, is this the same for each of you, that when you say the cost of the drug has remained flat, that you're including the cost of the ancillary fees? I'll just go down. Mr. Kolar, and go this way.
So, Senator, when we negotiate with pharmaceutical companies, we are fully transparent with our clients about the amounts we receive. We pass those back to the plans.
So is that 100% pass-through?
It is. We do. There are
on the fees.
There are elements of fees that we retain, but we retain them in lieu of charging our clients administrative fees.
I'm almost out of time, so I won't ask the others. I think the point there. Next. Okay, thank you. So I've also thought about the retain, because I have had several good meetings with you guys. Thank you very much. But one of the things that was raised with me was that sometimes clients would rather have a fee retained as opposed to paying a fee. And I have read that that is a way to circumvent the Obamacare MLR rule. And I say that not to ask your comment, because it's not your decision, it's the payor or the insurance company, but for the record, it has been at least labeled as that way. Next, I once went to a site of a pharmacy benefit manager, and very impressed with much of what you do, but one thing I saw was bottles being emptied, and then the same pill that had formerly been in one bottle was then placed in another bottle, and the second bottle is that which was sent. And I didn't understand that for the life of me. But at one point I was told that allows it to be billed at a higher NDC code. That sure we acquire, but because we empty one bottle and fill another, we can now even as much as triple the cost, the basis of the drug being shipped out to the patient. So let me just ask you yes or no if your company does that. Dr. Miller?
No.
Okay.
No.
No.
No. No.
Now, it was, I think, Express Scripts that I toured that, and I kind of lose track of who is who. Who now would be the recipient of Express Scripts?
I'm Express Scripts.
So I did remember seeing that. Is this then, therefore, a practice that has been discontinued?
What you probably remember is in our high-volume filler, we take, to make sure we have accuracy, we put the pills into these containers. When they're moved from the pill bottle, we can only buy the largest volume that the manufacturer makes. We use the high-volume fillers for mail-order pharmacy. We move it from the small containers into a larger container. The NDC does not change, and that does not change the price.
NDC does not change. That's my key point. Okay, I yield back. Thank you. And I'll have some QFRs, but thank you very much.
You always call me when nobody else is sitting here. Thank you, and thanks to all five of you for joining us. It's not exactly breaking news that Ohioans don't trust pharmacy benefit managers. Between repeated reports on the egregious use of spread pricing, alleged breaches of contract, accusations of anti-competitive behavior, a misuse of taxpayer dollars, a general lack of transparency, I can't say that I blame them. Several of you, I understand, are making a conscious effort to rebuild trust with Ohio pharmacies and consumers and taxpayers. I appreciate that, but I need you to do that better, and we need you to do that faster. Part of that means changing the way you think about your business, and it means considering models that benefit the Ohioan at the pharmacy counter as much as it benefits your direct client or the other half of your business. It is past time to put patients ahead of profits and Ohio taxpayers before shareholders, so I ask you to do that. I want to ask a few yes-no questions, starting with you, Mr. Kolar, and if you really would answer yes, no, just right to left. Does your company play a role in setting list prices of any drugs?
No, we do not.
No.
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 Okay, thank you. If the administration's rebate rule were finalized as proposed, would you in some way be required to change the way you do business?
Yes, Senator, we would.
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. If the administration's rebate rule were finalized as proposed, do you believe any pharma company would be required to change the way it does business?
No, Senator.
No.
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 Okay, last yes or no. This question is a short answer if you can. And thank you for your cooperation. What percentage of prescriptions that you fill across Part D actually receive a rebate? Roughly what percentage?
So, Senator, approximately 8% of the prescriptions that we cover in Part D are associated with a rebate.
Okay. Mr. Priest.
Senator, I don't know the exact number. I know overall business about 7%.
Okay, thank you.
About 7 to 8%.
Okay.
Senator, I do not know the exact number, but we pass through 100% of all rebates and discounts.
90% of the prescriptions will be generic. Of the 10% that are branded, about 2/3 have rebates, so it's about 7%.
7 or 8% like the others. Okay. To recap, PBMs do not set drug prices. Forcing you to change the way you do business, as the administration's rule will not change that fact. And while the rule might impact a small percentage of drugs in Part D that receive a rebate, it does nothing to lower costs, as your answer suggests, for the other 90% of prescriptions you fill. Most importantly, absolutely nothing in the proposed rule would require Secretary Azar's former employer or any other pharma company to lower the price of insulin or any other drug. It's important to establish that, so thank you for that. In fact, no pharma company is willing to commit to lowering the price of their drugs if this rule goes into effect. Instead of relying on the administration's claims that the proposed rebate rule will solve the drug pricing problem, we should be focusing on solutions that are sure to result in lower drug prices, like my legislation to allow Medicare to negotiate on behalf of all Part D drugs and to prohibit manufacturers from price gouging. In the last couple of minutes, many of you acknowledge your testimony to the fact that biosimilars have enormous potential to help lower drug prices for all Americans. As you know, biosimilars are approved by the FDA based on safety and efficacy, and in every circumstance that I'm aware of, they have a lower list price than their innovator product. Not surprising. I understand that many of your plans sometimes require the use of higher list price innovator or brand name products over the use of a cheaper, therapeutically equivalent FDA-approved biosimilar or generic. This is short-sighted. It's already having a chilling effect on the potential for a robust biosimilar market in the U.S. My time's about to expire, but I'd like to ask each of you to answer for the record what more your company can and will do and what more Congress should do to ensure the U.S. develops a robust biosimilar product. Let me start with you, Dr. Miller, if you would.
Yeah, so one of the biggest problems facing the industry is the lack of biosimilars that have come to the marketplace. The FDA has approved many biosimilars that still are not in the marketplace. They're caught up in law, in the legal actions. And so shortening the period of exclusivity could make a huge difference in bringing these biosimilars to the marketplace. And so we are strongly supportive and have been for over a decade to get biosimilars out there. And when they are there, we often take great advantage of them to lower the cost for our plans.
Thank you. And Mr. Rice, as you answer the same question, include in it any pushback ideas on manufacturers' tactics like bundling rebates and rebate blocking. So go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Rice.
Yes, Senator. As you've heard previously from my counterpart here, that we absolutely are supportive of bringing more competition into the marketplace. We've seen even in the space of insulin, when we've been able to have that competition of biosimilar introduction, we were actually able to reduce for the members out of pockets their burden by 9%. And so having more competition like that on the market would be extremely beneficial. And we know today that the U.S. still lags Europe in the availability of biosimilars.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming.
Senator,
Could they,
no.
they each have,
Yeah,
they could answer the
I
question.
thought you had just had one question. But
No, it's one for all of them.
everybody answer his question, and then we'll
Thank
go
you.
to Senator Hassan.
Yes, Senator. We need more competition. We love biosimilars. When they do come out, we try to put them in parity position with the originator drug to allow the biosimilar to compete. But the big problem we have today is we need more. More competition allows prices to come down for the same therapeutic area.
And a shorter window, as Dr. Miller suggested, would work. Okay. Mr. Prince?
Senator, there's a lot needs to be done to increase competition in the biosimilars market. We're very strong supporters of it. There's over 50 biosimilars that are actually used in Europe. Less than 6 are around 6 or 7 are on the market in the United States. And so the main reform areas could be in the FDA. So there's a series of things, if you follow up, we would love to provide solutions that you could work on. Thank you.
So, Senator, we are very supportive of biosimilars. We generally treat them on parity or preferred over brand. We assess them on the low net cost basis. We don't engage, you asked about bundling. Bundling is not a practice for us that creates a meaningful barrier to biosimilar uptake. We think one of the biggest barriers to uptake of biosimilars is the lack of final FDA guidance on interchangeability.
Senator Hassan.
Mr. Chairman, one more thing. I'm sorry. I apologize. I think their answers really do show the importance of a shorter window on biosimilar on exclusivity. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank you and Ranking Member Wyden for having this hearing. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Prince, as you mentioned in your testimony, we can't lose sight of some of the truly obscene price increases from drug manufacturers that we have seen in recent years, and I agree that we can't solve the problem of skyrocketing prescription drug costs without addressing that. But we do have a responsibility to look at all points in the supply chain. We spend a lot of time attempting to educate patients, for instance, about the value of choosing lower-cost generic alternatives, and many formularies penalize consumers financially when they don't. You point out in your testimony that there are times when, because of rebates and discounts that you negotiate, the brand name drug may be the better value to the plan than the authorized generic. I certainly understand that and recognize that you have to balance the needs of a variety of payers in developing your plan. But just this week, my office heard from a constituent, not for the first time, who was baffled about why he is being told to pay more for the brand name drug instead of using the generic. In the cases where the brand name drug is the better financial option for your company and for the plan purchaser, why aren't you charging the end-use consumer the lower copay?
So, Senator, just to frame the overall discussion around how things go on the formulary, and then I'll talk about how we then. So our formulary process starts with an independent pharmaceutical and therapeutics committee that's independent from our company.
But and I do want to hear about that. I'd ask you to keep it short because I have another question, and I'm really trying to get at why doesn't the consumer get the benefit that you also say in your testimony your company does?
We absolutely agree with you that the consumer should get all the value that we're negotiating, and that's why last year and this year we've made such a huge effort around making sure that every discount we get is passed on to the consumer at point of sale.
So
and that we've now have 9 million people as part of that program. We're not going to take any additional customers in 2020 without that, but not all of our customers have that yet. But we're sharing the evidence with them around the value for that program.
Okay. So in the case of a consumer being told they've got to buy a brand name drug and pay more for it because ultimately you're directing them that way because it increases the profits for your company, you are saying here that you want to get to a place where the consumer recognizes the savings and could be charged the lower copay. The PBM is choosing the brand name in some cases, and the consumer shouldn't be stuck with that decision by your company, is my point.
So, Senator, it's a rare circumstance where a brand would be less expensive, but in the rare circumstances, because we negotiate a deal on behalf negotiate on behalf of our customers, that the price of the generic would actually be higher than the brand after you look at all the discounts. So the actual price, not for us, but for our client, is less expensive. And then we want to make sure that that value is then passed on to the consumer, which is why we're advocating for point-of-sale discounts in the commercial market.
All right, I'm going to follow up with you a little bit after this hearing about that, because I just think what my constituents are seeing is they're being told they've got to purchase a brand name and they're being charged the higher copay for it.
Okay.
Okay. To all of the witnesses, I know there's been a discussion here about Chairman Grassley's inquiry to the FTC. In theory, we know that PBMs help patients by helping negotiate lower prices. But I am concerned that the lack of competition in this area may mean that the industry is falling short of that goal today. And I know there's been discussion already about what level of competition you all think there is. The Federal Trade Commission oversees PBMs and has already begun looking into concentration and competition in this market. And Chairman Grassley mentioned this in his opening statement and sent a letter to the FTC about the issue this fall. The FTC has the authority to do more, to request rebate and fee information and analyze the impact of your companies on drug prices. I think that's a good idea, and I plan to join Chairman Grassley in talking with the FTC and ultimately encouraging them to look into it further. So I would just like your commitment today that if the FTC requests information from you, that your companies will cooperate fully and provide the information that the agency needs to conduct a rigorous analysis. And we'll just start at the end of the table, and I just would, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, we look forward to participating.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Senator.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator, we'll cooperate.
Yes, Senator, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Daines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm hearing from folks all over Montana, in fact, in every corner of our state, on the need to lower prescription drug costs, particularly out-of-pocket costs. I believe one way to help lower costs of prescription drugs is to shine light on the role of the middleman, which is why you're here today. That's what you are. You're between the pharmaceutical company and the consumer. It's your role, as I understand, to negotiate better drug prices for patients. What we're seeing today is that there's higher profits on your end, and we're not seeing lower costs ultimately for the end user, for Montanans. In fact, in Montana, there's a bill before legislature as we speak that aims to hold you all accountable and then pass along these savings to consumers versus profits back to the PBMs. We need more transparency on drug pricing to lower costs for patients, and I'm exploring legislative options to do just that. My question to the panel is, we're getting a lot of resistance back in Montana, and why are you all fighting so hard against that legislation in Montana and efforts here to increase transparency and to pass on that savings that you negotiate to patients? I'll open it to whoever wants to take the question first.
Senator, I am not familiar with that specific piece of legislation, but it pertains to transparency overall. We at CVS Caremark are very supportive. We provide full visibility to our clients of all our contracts and the discounts that we negotiate on their behalf. As I stated earlier, we pass through in the Medicare book of business 100% of all rebates and discounts. We pass through overall more than 98%. In the spirit of transparency, we've been supportive of policies like legislation being proposed like MedPAC. What we've done to try to further enhance transparency is we provide a real-time benefit such that the members themselves, the patients, actually have that same visibility. And we too are concerned about the out-of-pocket burden on patients. And so therefore, we brought forward tools that can specifically help them, like point-of-sale rebates, like preventative drug lists for maintenance drugs that would have a $0 copay, which then they would have to worry about the deductible phase with high deductible plans. These are things that can impact the patient immediately.
I want to shift gears. Mr. Prince, we saw the report that Optum sent a letter to drug makers in December asking for 7 quarters of advance notice. That's nearly 2 years if a manufacturer is going to lower their price for patients. When Montana patients are choosing not to fill their prescriptions, and we get these stories because of high out-of-pocket costs, requesting a nearly 2-year advance notice frankly shocked me. In fact, this type of demand would have prevented Montanans from getting about a 60% price reduction in their cholesterol-lowering medications after a drug maker announced they were dropping their list price just last year. Working that out, that's nearly $8,000 per year per patient for those Montanans who take that drug. Montanans can't afford to pay higher prices for 2 years for the sake of keeping industry happy and perhaps Wall Street. My question is, why does the company need to take more money out of the pockets of Montanans for nearly 2 years versus you doing your job to negotiate and lower costs for patients?
Well, Senator, specifically on rebates and discounts in the Medicare market, we pass 100% on to the plan and it's just fully disclosed to CMS. So the discounts are fully passed on. And then in terms of the commercial market for employers, we are an advocate for point-of-sale discounts. We rolled that out dramatically. So the discounts that we're delivering actually get passed on. So we actually are not going to be taking additional customers in 2020 unless we pass on the discounts. So on overall, the people from Montana are getting the value from what we deliver.
Just curious, so why the 7 quarter?
That was really Senator. That was a technical legal contract that was in making sure that we could get information so that our clients, when they submitted their bids, in June, they would have all the information they need to actually submit their bids correctly. And as you know, in the Medicare Part D program, you submit a bid in June for the following year, so that covers the 7 quarters.
On another note, I think we can all agree on the importance of cracking down on drug companies to discourage low-cost generic drugs from coming to market. Since last Congress, I've worked with Chairman Grassley on the CRATES Act to combat anti-competitive practices and improve Montana's access to lower-cost generic drugs. I'm going to continue to push for this common sense legislation to be signed into law and pursuing other legislative priorities that will lower drug costs for folks in every corner of Montana and across this nation. Thank you.
To the people that are here. No, Senator from New Mexico. Nevada, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Appreciate the opportunity. I met with some of you as well and had the opportunity to talk to you. And one of the things we talked about were rebates. Many of you discussed products that you offer clients that allow for point-of-sale rebates. And I'm curious, in those contracts, do you keep any portion of the rebate for yourself? And if we would just kind of go down the table.
No, we do not. No, we do not.
Senator, no.
No, we do not.
No.
No? That's a no? Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me ask you, Dr. Fleming, in your testimony, you say Humana's analysis of the rebate rule, and we're talking about the administration's rebate rule now, but you say that Humana's analysis of the rule found that approximately 17% of beneficiaries will see savings at the pharmacy counter as a result of this rule. Can you tell me a little bit more about who these people are and what kind of conditions do they have?
Senator, that would be a number of members who are taking brand drugs for which we get rebates. And so it could vary all the way from the common chronic conditions, things like diabetes or hypertension or high cholesterol, all the way over to occasionally, not usually, but occasionally on the specialty drug side, when you think of some medications like treatments for rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, places where there's competition.
Okay. So let me ask you this, and I'll open it up to everyone. There's a lot of hesitance from all sides of the industry to talk about models that would enable HHS to negotiate directly with manufacturers. But there are a handful of therapies, those are the sole source drugs, for which there is no therapeutic alternative, where you have no leverage to negotiate better prices. One of my concerns with the rebate rule is that it wouldn't address this issue. Is there any situation where you would support or perhaps remain neutral on giving the Secretary the ability to negotiate prices for that subsection of drugs? I'm curious to the witnesses, and we'll open it up.
So, Senator, we would have to study the issue more closely, but in our perspective, well, the Secretary would certainly be able to aggregate volume. What we bring is clinical expertise and the pharmacy expertise to better negotiate with manufacturers. That would have to be replicated within the department or an agency in order to do that effectively.
Okay, so you would want to study it before you signed off on or supported or remain neutral whether or not the Secretary could negotiate for those drugs?
With the specific question, with respect to the question of government negotiation overall, our perspective is that it would require a significant development of formulary expertise within the government to replicate the work that we do. With respect to the narrow drugs that you mentioned, we would want to study the issue. Our inclination is that that would not be as effective as what we do as PBMs.
For sole source drugs?
Correct.
Correct. Do you feel the same way?
Senator, we think the solution is around creating more competition, addressing patent issues, addressing biosimilars in the market, and that would be the solution that we think would solve it.
Okay.
Senator, similar, we need more competition. We need more biosimilars. My concern with government negotiation for those sole source drugs would be higher list prices initially when those drugs come out to offset what the manufacturer may have to give up. And I'd invite a conversation at the right time around other tools we can employ around value-based contracts. We're asking physicians to engage in value-based contracts. We're asking hospitals to engage in them. We have programs with pharmacies. But we need more tools. We need the flexibility to bring more tools to market so that when these sole source drugs are out, that we've got the ability to hold them accountable for the clinical outcomes that they're intended for.
Okay.
We too, Senator, believe that before we move down that path, that we should look to exhaust all the other options that are available to us today, such as bringing more competition into this space. We know that, via the Hep C example that was cited earlier this morning, that when we have competition, we can bring down drug prices, and we do have leverage in that equation.
Thank you.
Like my colleagues, we believe that competition is the key to bringing down the drug prices, and using the tools that we have in value-based contracting, which is not allowed in Part D, would be crucial to help it to be one more of those tools that would help.
Okay. And the final question I have, let me direct it to Mr. Prince. When I was in Las Vegas recently, I spoke with a constituent who was prescribed Xolair, a specialty medication for uncontrolled moderate to severe asthma. His copay for that medication is $489 per month. In September of 2018, the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review found that all 5 of the major biological asthma treatments that are on the market, including Xolair, were overpriced. The Institute also said that the cost of Xolair specifically should be cut in half if the price of the drug were to properly reflect its efficacy. Do you use evidence like this in negotiations with drug companies? And if so, how effective is it?
So, Senator, we use evidence-based clinical information initially to see if it goes on the formulary. So our process actually starts with independent pharmacists and physicians to evaluate a clinical effectiveness of a drug, the comparative effectiveness of it, whether it goes on the formulary or not. Then we go use that same data as part of then the cost negotiation. So it is part of the process.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Senator Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Various stakeholders have called for more transparency in your transactions, specifically into the rebates and administrative fees paid by manufacturers. If Congress did what these stakeholders are calling for and made all PBM negotiations with the manufacturer, insurer, wholesaler, and pharmacy transparent and publicly available, how would that affect your drug pricing? Would there be a race to the top or perhaps a race to the bottom? We'll start with Dr. Miller and then Head down the line, please.
Yeah, so we are really strong proponents for transparency for those who pay for health care. So the patients should know exactly what they're going to pay. Our plan.
You mind speaking into the microphone, sir? Yeah, thank you.
The patients should know exactly what they're going to pay. Our plan sponsors need to know exactly what's in their contract. The FTC and the FEC have both ruled that or demonstrated that if you provide transparency for competitors, what that does is it puts a floor on negotiations. It does not put a ceiling. And so what happens is you would have shallower rebates. So the ability to negotiate is enhanced by the competitors not knowing each other's data.
Mr. Rice?
Yes, Senator. We are very supportive of transparency. And transparency today, we report and fully disclosive not only to our clients, but to CMS. And we've been very supportive of legislative proposals like MedPAC. And many of you heard me comment earlier today about even bringing transparency to the patient through our real-time benefits. What we're not supportive of is public transparency that would inhibit our ability to effectively negotiate with drug manufacturers to get to the lowest possible cost for patients and to lower their out-of-pocket premiums and the cost of the plans.
We'll head down the line. Yes, sir.
Senator, we're an integrated health plan, so we spend a lot of time with transparency either at the patient level and at the physician level. I mentioned our Intelligent RX tool. I submitted it in our testimony about how we give physicians information right on the glass in the exam room so that they can have really important conversations with the patient. In this example that you're talking about, the thing I worry about is behaviors. In this case, the manufacturer behavior of wanting to negotiate to the lowest possible price if everything's fully transparent. Will they regress to the mean? Will they want to demonstrate that one company's got a better deal than another company because it's fully transparent? I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how that will show up, but I'm not convinced that full transparency will allow the manufacturers to negotiate as feverishly as they could otherwise.
Senator, if our discounts were publicly available, it would hurt our ability to negotiate effectively. Our discounts are transparent to our clients. Our clients have audit rights to actually look at our rebate contracts, look at the—
They have what rights? I'm sorry, sir.
Audit rights.
Okay.
So our clients have audit rights to look at our rebate contracts, to look at line item detail on how much we get and tie it back to their contracts. So we have transparency to who hires us. We also are transparent to the government in terms of disclosing it to CMS in terms of our rebates. But if you disclose that to the external market, it would hurt our ability to get a good value for the people we negotiate for.
So, Senator, our business model is founded on a basis of transparency, and we are strong believers in transparency where it's meaningful and actionable in ways that can help improve the system and lower costs. So we believe in client transparency. We believe in actionable provider and patient transparency. We do share the concern around the transparency of our negotiations with pharmacies, with pharma, and the impact that that would have on our ability to drive savings for our plans and ultimately to their members.
Is there an issue that any of you could speak to, perhaps a challenge where if we require transparency in a more robust way, there will be adverse selection, especially in the Medicare Part D program, which is a voluntary program? Does that resonate with anyone? No? Okay. Is there a way to inject transparency into the entire pricing system without giving proprietary information away?
I will tell you that transparency tools are crucial, and giving doctors transparency at the time of prescribing is crucial to the patient and the doctor choosing the right drug. We've actually run an analysis where we have real-time benefit check in the hands of about 120,000 doctors already, and we can see that when they have that information, the patient and the physician can choose the lower-cost drug and even the lower-cost channel to get the drug, either the right pharmacy, mail-order pharmacy. So you're correct that transparency tools done well will make a huge difference in the marketplace.
Senator Thune.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this hearing, and thanks for our witness for being here today. I hear often from South Dakotans frustration from healthcare providers regarding transparency and the power that a few PBMs in the market wield, particularly when it comes to the retroactive application of DIR fees for pharmacies. For many of these pharmacies, especially those serving rural areas, it's difficult for them to run their businesses not knowing how much PBMs will pull back later. We've heard support from the panel for a few of the bills that Chairman Grassley and others have introduced. I think many of us would like to see some ideas on the table for what role that your industry can play in advancing transparency in the drug supply chain. And I guess I think the thing that most people find frustrating is just how opaque the healthcare pricing system is generally, whether it's hospitals or pharmaceuticals. All these things, they're in most free market economies, competition helps drive prices down, but people know what prices are. If you go into a store, there's usually a list price, and the discount might be on there. We're marking it down 40%. People understand that, and in a free market, they can make very informed decisions because they have an opportunity to comparison shop. And it just seems to me that in this area of healthcare, like in other areas of healthcare, that there isn't that transparency. And I understand what you're saying about the ability to negotiate and contracts and propriety and not being able to give away trade secrets and that sort of thing, but it does really detract, you got to understand, from people's understanding of this market. And there is a list price, and there's a rebate, and there are discounts, and there's a net price ultimately that's offered out there. But it all happens in this kind of opaque world that I think people just find really, really uncomfortable and question. It raises a lot of doubts. For the panel, in testimony from Mr. Kolar and Mr. Prince, there was some discussion about the decisions for PBMs to consider clinical value and efficacy first when setting formularies as opposed to price and rebates, the importance of obviously premiums in negotiations. We've heard a lot about that today between manufacturers and PBMs, where rebates are used to incentivize placement of a more costly brand name drug over a generic, or where rebates are conditioned based on the exclusion of another cheaper clinically effective drug from the formulary. Do all of the panelists take the same approach to negotiation? And how do you assess and determine clinical value in making these decisions, and how do you respond if price and rebates become the driving factor in the negotiation instead? And the question's been kind of asked in different ways today, but somebody take a shot at that.
So,
anybody?
Senator, if I understand the question, our approach, again, as a transparent, client-owned PBM, our approach in setting formularies, making formulary recommendations, as you said, you referenced the testimony, starts first with an assessment of clinical safety and efficacy. Then we assess if there are competing drugs available, and we've talked much today about the need for competition. We do assess on a lowest net cost basis. So what is going to be the lowest net cost alternative for our plans to adopt for the benefit of their members? We do also consider the impact of patient transition in making formulary recommendations to our plans.
Does everybody follow that same negotiating tactic, and do you take into consideration efficacy?
Absolutely, Senator. We start with first making sure that we provide the highest level of quality of clinical care. And then only when we've met that threshold, then do we begin to bring into consideration cost and providing the lowest cost alternative to the members. Because we've seen that when the drugs are more affordable for those members, they tend to have better adherence, and then downstream have better medical outcomes. And that, in essence, brings down total health care costs.
Senator, the thing I might add is we think about safety, efficacy, outcomes, and unit cost in that order. If I had a dream, I'd have more outcomes for when these medications come to market. Typically, all we know is that they're safe and effective. It's over time that we build a body of evidence to understand, does drug X really avoid a hospitalization? Does it avoid an ER visit? Does it help with some sort of activity of daily living that has nothing to do with other healthcare costs? But those conversations are really important as we think about coverage and providing the best health outcomes for our patients.
Mr. Rice and Dr. Miller, you both referenced legislation that I've worked on with Senator Carper to apply value-based insurance design to high-deductible health plans for chronic disease management. And I'll have you maybe submit this for the record, but I'd like to know, if enacted, how you expect plans to utilize this tool and what will be the impact on drug prices and health care spending more broadly. Like I said, my time has expired, Mr. Chairman, but I would, if you would take that one for the record, I'd like to get your reaction. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Portman.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for being here today to shed light on a complicated area. I hear a lot of frustration back home over the cost of prescription drugs, and for some people, they actually aren't taking the prescription drugs they should be taking because of those high costs, so it's affecting their health care. And everybody's got a role to play in this along the chain, going from the manufacturer to the pharmacy and to the consumer, and one is the PBMs. You've got a role to play in trying to lower costs and bring more transparency, word that's been used a lot here today, to the system. People have a right to know. And in Ohio, as Mr. Rice, Mr. Prince probably know, there's currently a lot of discussion about that. I'm sure you've seen the investigative reports from the Columbus Dispatch and other stories regarding disputes between the state and your respective companies. With regard to CVS, there have been concerns that you're withholding savings from the state Medicaid program and not providing equitable reimbursement to pharmacies. In regards to OptumRx, the state has raised concerns, again, regarding the company withholding savings from Medicaid, and the Attorney General has also accused your company of failing to disclose certain rebates to the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Comp that are contractually supposed to be passed along to the state and to beneficiaries. I'm sure you're aware of those allegations and the stories. First, I'd like to know what your answers are as to why the state and other stakeholders in the system would accuse you of hiding this kind of information. And again, getting back to my comment on transparency, wouldn't transparency solve a lot of this, particularly with regard to the rebates?
Senator, I'll go first. Let me start by first saying that I absolutely share your interest in making sure that we bring the utmost level of transparency to not only the plans but also the members and the constituencies and consumers in your state as well as other states. The things that we've done, and I think it's been validated through the independent audit report that was conducted as well, that I think we saved the state about $145 million. In the course of that, we've now made a decision as of January 1st of this year that we have no longer spread pricing. And as it relates to your commentary around pharmacy reimbursement, we reimburse the independent pharmacies far higher than the other major chains, including CVS pharmacy retailers as well. So we try to bring a level of transparency such that people can make the right decisions. And even to Senator Thune's earlier comments about consumers needing to be able to, healthcare consumers being able to act like consumers, we've also tried to be transparency at the patient level. And the way we've tried to do that is equipping them with the data and the visibility to it such that they can do the comparison shop. So today we have real-time benefits, which enables a physician to, in their office through electronic health records, share with that patient.
I totally support that. I think that's critical to getting costs down. Ultimately, yes. Consumers are pretty smart. But I want to give Mr. Prince a chance to respond on the rebates. And let me just say this. If Ohio government, which can bring the full weight of the government down on this issue to find out what the rebates ought to be, is having trouble getting the information, how about the small business out there? I mean, why shouldn't these rebates be more transparent as to the beneficiary, which ultimately is the people I represent in terms of the Medicaid system and the Bureau of Workers' Comp system?
If I could just share, Senator, we pass through 100% of the rebates and discounts.
Yeah, but
100%.
Transparency has been the issue that we've not been able to resolve, even in this case with the state of Ohio bringing pressure on the PBM system. Mr. Prince?
Senator, we believe we've delivered against our contract for the state and also for the Bureau. I'm not going to go into the details in the litigation here, but I guess I would say overall we're working closely with them to resolve the matter and making sure we address the concerns for them. From an overall organization, we're very focused on, from a rebate standpoint, point-of-sale discounts. We actually have made, as a organization, we pass on 100% in the Medicare market, 100% in the Medicaid market and are committed in the commercial market to moving to everybody having point-of-sale discounts. We're not taking on any additional customers in 2020 and beyond unless they do point-of-sale discounts.
Okay.
The matter.
Well, again, that's a matter of transparency also,
right.
so people can see what it is and understand what they're getting. Let me give you one quick story here where PBMs, I think, play a constructive role. And this is with regard to investigation we did in the Permanent Subcommittee investigations on the Evzio product, which is a naloxone product. It's a life-saving thing in the opioid epidemic. This is a miracle drug that reverses the effects of an overdose. Kaleo, a company which provides this Evzio product, had dramatically increased their price. And they did it through kind of a loophole under the Part D Medicare program, saying that doctors should say it's medically necessary. And in that case, the PBM actually was encouraging the lower priced alternative. And I think that's what your role ought to be. In other words, you all stepped in as a PBM and said, this life-saving care can be provided at a lower cost. Now, when they found the loophole, frankly, the PBMs didn't have any additional role to play. And because the loophole is in our law, we're trying to fix that. And ultimately, I will tell you that the costs went down dramatically once we shone some light on this. But I give that as an example where I think PBMs can play a positive role in the case of trying to keep drug costs down for beneficiaries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cardin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank all of our witnesses for being here. I want to drill down a little bit on your responsibility in regards to the public itself. You're the benefit managers. You're at the best interest of the people who need your services. And today there's, according to the FDA, 270 drugs currently are in shortage. I know of specific drugs that are absolutely essential for infants that are born, their health, including eye drops that are not readily available for cancer treatment, that's not readily available. These are inexpensive drugs that are not difficult to produce, that are not being produced because the pharmaceutical manufacturer, usually one source, does not think it's worthwhile from a profit point of view. Now, you have contracts with pharmaceutical manufacturers. Why haven't you done something to act on making sure that in this country we don't have shortages of drugs that are essential for the health of the people in our community? You enter into contracts every day with pharmaceutical companies. Why isn't this one of your goals, to make sure that in the wealthiest nation in the world, common drugs that are absolutely essential for serious health needs are in shortage? Who can answer that for me? Mr. Chairman, the silence is deafening.
I will help you mostly from a physician standpoint and not as a PBM.
But please.
Let me help you out here. Having drugs in supply is crucial, and so we do everything we can to make sure our patients have the drugs they need. There are drugs that are used in hospital, which are different than the ones that we administer as an outpatient as a pharmacy benefits manager. The vast majority of the shortages in the last several years have been in-hospital drugs.
So do any of your people that are in your plans ever use hospitals?
Most definitely they use hospitals.
Do you care about their health?
And so we care passionately about their health, and I as a physician care tremendously.
So why haven't you taken up this issue with the pharmaceutical
We actually do. So we actually have predictive models where we can try to see which drugs are being short supply. The biggest problem that we've had in the United States is when there's a single source manufacturer.
Yes.
And usually the problem is specific to that product. So it's either.
And don't you have contracts with that single source manufacturer on other drugs?
So they either flunk, sometimes, sometimes not. But when they flunk an FDA evaluation at their factory and they're forced to shut down. So we've worked with, and I think Dr. Gottlieb has done a great job at the FDA. If you look at the number of shortages, they've actually dropped dramatically over the last several years because he's actually prioritizing review of those products to make sure that other companies can either compete or that product can get back into the marketplace?
You know, we all hear about using market forces. I was very impressed with our conversations of how market forces bring down the cost and how you use that in your bargaining power of pharmaceutical companies to get the very best possible price for your customers, for your consumers. Why don't you use that market force to make sure we don't have drug shortages? That's my point. You can make a difference today on this issue. You can use market forces to say, look, we won't tolerate our subscribers not having access to absolutely essential medicines because there's a single source manufacturer who's made an economic decision that it's not worthy to manufacture that drug. Did any of you have an explanation why we're not doing something? You're relying on, you don't want government to set price, but you want government to deal with shortages when you could deal with shortages. Any ideas here?
The best idea, Senator, and we talked about this a bit, is competition, is working through with the FDA to make more generics, and quite frankly, the shortages that we're talking about are usually for those single source or generics, and making more generics available to the marketplace. And we talked about ways that we can try to incentivize manufacturers to pursue and to manufacture more generics than we do today.
I can't accept that. I'll tell you why. You're a major factor in the pharmaceutical delivery system. The market forces are allowing you to make profits, which is fine. You have leverage over pharmaceutical manufacturers. You can affect whether it'll be on a formulary or not. You really determine their financial success, and that's why you negotiate your price. But it's more than the unit price of a particular drug that my constituents and your subscribers are interested in. They're interested in their general health. And if they can't get a medicine today to deal with their cancer, and that's a real example, why aren't you taking the initiative to change that? I really don't understand that. If you have a useful role in this process, then deal with this issue.
Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to start off with the same free advice I gave the former CEOs that appeared before the committee in February, which is, and as someone who appreciates the industry as a whole, from the state of New Jersey, but either you come to the table with real solutions to help patients in terms of the costs, or you'll find a legislative response that you won't care for. So I really urge you to be part of the solution at the end of the day, or you will find a legislative response you don't care for. Having said that, so there are widespread reports that PBMs engage in spread pricing, especially for generic drugs, where they pay the pharmacy one price, but turn around and charge their clients several times the price the pharmacy received. So let me tell you how this little game seems to me. It's like asking your mom for $10 to buy a T-shirt that costs $8 and giving the seller only $7 and keeping the rest for yourself. So have any of you here today ever engaged in that practice? Just go down the line and give me an answer, yes or no.
We provide our clients with a lot of options on how to pay for their pharmacy benefit, and spread pricing is one of those options.
So the answer to that is yes. Next, Mr. Rice. Could you put your microphone on?
Sorry, Senator. Yes, we provide our clients with options, which include spread pricing.
Dr. Plummer.
For our, Senator, thank you. For our 8.4 million Part D members, absolutely no, never. For our commercial fully insured members, no. And for our limited self-funded block of business, we do offer that option. That's about 200,000 members.
Mr. Prince. Senator, we do not do it in the Medicare program. In the commercial and Medicaid market, it's a client choice about how they want to offer, how to pay for our services. 99% of the time, we actually offer the solution either way, and the client chooses how they want to pay for our services.
So, Senator, in our model, we are focused on creating savings for our plans and not margins. We do not engage in spread pricing as a part of our business model.
Mm-hmm. So, what's the difference between the rebates you negotiate? Let me ask this of Mr. Prince and Mr. Miller. Are the rebates you negotiate from pharmaceutical companies and the separate administrative fees that you charge the same companies? Mr. Prince.
So in the Medicare program, we only collect a fixed rebate from pharmaceutical manufacturers and pass 100% on. We do not have a administrative fee in the Medicare market or the Medicaid market. Those markets are, we have just fixed discounts that we pass on. In the commercial market, we do have a administrative fee that is disclosed to our client, and that's for clinical services.
Mr. Miller.
So in Medicare, as you know, all the fees pass back to the government. In the commercial marketplace, we give our plans options as to how they want to pay us. Many of them take all the rebates and the administrative fees. Some choose to let us keep a portion.
Are these administrative fees based on list price like the rebates? Just give me a simple yes or no.
The administrative fee is usually a fixed fee, not based on the rebates, and it's for service.
Are they based on the list price?
Are they based on the list price? I would have, I believe that there is options to base it on the list price or to have a flat fee.
Mr. Prince?
Senator, as I said before, the administrative fees only in the commercial market. They're linked to the services that we offer. Today they are linked to a percent, but we're open to changing that to a fair market value that's fixed.
Because as the list prices increase, the administrative fees you collect as well increase. Is that not true?
That's why we give our plans the option.
That's why I also give our plans the options of how to pay for our services.
Finally, when a drug company does lower their list price, how long does it take for the patient at the pharmacy counter to see that savings, if ever? Let me give you an example. Last fall, you may have read in the news that the list price for one PCSK9 inhibitor, a cholesterol-lowering drug, went down by 60%. Despite the price's decrease, putting the drug's price below the threshold for specialty tier status, I recently read that PBMs have kept the drug on a specialty tier, which means it is more expensive for Medicare beneficiaries. Going down the line, can you tell me in one or two sentences why a list price cut would not lead to lower prices for consumers? And if you're going to tell me it's the different national codes, then if you get guidance on how to handle this NDC issue, can we expect lower list prices leading to immediate tier changes?
Thanks for the question, Senator. As you know, we were the ones that actually negotiated with that PCSK9 inhibitor company to bring that lower price to the marketplace. And so we definitely believe those prices should be reflected in what the patients pay.
Senator, when those lower list prices result in the lowest net cost for the patient as well as for the plan, then absolutely that's the preferred drug on formulary.
Senator, we like lower list prices, and candidly, had we known that the manufacturer were going to lower its list price or bring an authorized generic to market or bring one of these other things that allow their prices to come down during the formulary setting time for Medicare, which is around this time of the year, in 2018 for this 2019 period, we absolutely would have had that drug on formulary. We absolutely anticipate including those drugs on formulary for the 2020 benefit year.
Senator, we strongly encourage pharmaceutical companies to lower the list price, do that in our discussions with them. We are a strong advocate for making sure we pass on the value of all the discounts we negotiate onto that consumer. That's why last year we expanded that program dramatically. It will serve 9 million people in 2019. We're going to only have new customers that have in 2020 that pass on the consumer discount, all that value to the consumer at the point of sale.
So, Senator, as a PBM focused on driving savings for our plans, we welcome lower list prices as well. When a lower list price drug becomes available, we will assess the net cost effect to our plan as well as the impact of transition across members. And if that drug is the lower net cost, we will prefer that drug, and those savings will pass through to the members.
Thank you. Senator Carper.
Thanks. Our thanks to each of you. I think my staff and I have had the privilege to meet with most of you in the run-up to today's hearing. We appreciate your time. We spend, as I mentioned to those with whom I've met, when we took up the Affordable Care Act, we found out we're in this room. Remember our witnesses saying that folks in Japan were spending 8% of GDP for healthcare costs, 8%. We were spending 18%. They got better results and covered everybody. And we did not get better results. And we had about 40 million people at the time going to bed at night without health care coverage and said, well, we can do better than that. And in some respects, we have done better than that. I think if we had more cooperation, some of our friends on the other side of the aisle, and the current president, I think we do even better in terms of getting better results for less money, providing care that people need. We have a strong interest in pharmaceuticals in my state as consumers, as patients, people who pay for health care, and also for employment. And we have some very fine companies that are involved in pharmaceuticals, as you may know. One of the things I like to try to do is develop consensus and define consensus on a panel like this. Is what I'd like to do in the next couple of minutes. But in the last finance hearing on drug prices, we heard from drug manufacturers that passing rebates directly to consumers, improving transparency, and adopting value-based arrangements would help reduce prescription costs. I'm not going to ask you to comment on those, but there's a fourth one that came up, and that was putting a cap on patients' out-of-pocket drug costs. And they suggested that putting a cap on patients' out-of-pocket drug costs may well help reduce prescription drug prices. And I would just like to hear from each of you. We'll start with you, Mr. Kolar. I don't think I had a chance to meet with you before the hearing, so I'll start off with you. Do you agree with that? Why or why not?
So, Senator, capping patient costs, I assume you're speaking about Part D and a proposal to cap costs there. We believe that that's an issue worth studying. That when the Part D benefit design was rolled out, it was not the drug pricing environment that we have today. Patients are exposed to very high drug costs at the pharmacy counter, a percentage of them. We do believe, however, that that's going to require all stakeholders to be a part of the conversation. We can't, squeeze the balloon and then have increased costs in the form of higher premiums for beneficiaries or higher costs to taxpayers. It's going to have to require manufacturer participation and list price relief.
All right, thank you. Mr. Prince?
Senator, we would support a capping of the Part D out-of-pocket if it was part of a broader reform of the Part D program. The program has been around and delivered a lot of value for seniors over the last decade plus for over almost 50 million seniors. And so it was part of a broader reform that makes sure it looks at all the implications for other changes too.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fleming? Dr. Fleming?
Senator, thank you. We absolutely support modernizing Part D. I think the notion of putting caps on out-of-pocket costs is one of the tools that could be used, delivering and dealing with the specialty drug issue where nearly half the drug spend in the next couple of years will be consumed by specialty drugs, consumed by 2% is another example. I'm not convinced that just putting caps on member out-of-pockets will cause the manufacturers to lower the list price. I think you're going to need to think through what are the tools and levers to maybe have the manufacturers participate in those out-of-pocket limits or other levers to pull there. But I do think out-of-pocket cost is something that's important for consumers.
Thank you. Mr. Rice?
Senator, we absolutely share the concern in terms of the burden of out-of-pocket costs on today's patients and American citizens. We absolutely would support putting a spending limit or a cap for seniors in terms of their out-of-pocket exposure. At the same time, we also support tools such as preventative drug lists with zero copays as another means of also trying to deal with the out-of-pocket burdens of Americans in this country.
All right, thanks. Dr. Miller?
Yes, thanks for the question. I think targeted copay caps are really crucial. As you know, just a couple weeks ago, we rolled out the patient assurance program where we capped insulin at $25 a month. We believe that it's really important for our diabetic patients to be able to take their medications. That's the best way to lower costs for the country and improve health outcomes. But it should be in a very targeted manner.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. I just want to mention a question for the record on that, but I just want to get it out here. And it relates to the first question, but for the 40% of drugs in Medicare Part D that don't offer rebates, what are your recommendations for lowering their prices? And I'll ask you I'll give you that question to respond to for the record. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Casey.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for being here. I think I may have said this to each of you at various times when we've discussed these issues, that when it comes to this issue, the cost of prescription drugs, if this issue were playing out in isolation, that would be one thing. Unfortunately, the folks who are bearing the burden of this, bearing the cost, are the same folks who have lived in a country where wages went up by 12% over 40 years by one estimate. So 4 decades, wages up only 12%. And the cost of everything you can imagine for the middle class and folks trying to get to the middle class are skyrocketing. If you're younger and you've got a family, it's the cost of child care, maybe saving for college. It seems like everyone is impacted by the cost of prescription drugs going through the roof. I just had a witness from Pennsylvania to our aging committee, Barbara Cizik, who was from southwestern Pennsylvania, 63 years old. She's got multiple chronic conditions, including ulcers, COPD, severe migraines, and the list gets longer and longer. $500 a month she's paying just on prescription drugs, doesn't include premiums and doesn't include doctor visits. So Barbara is emblematic of that senior citizen carrying yet another cost. It's like American families have been had bags of rocks on their back, and prescription drugs is just another bag of rocks that gets thrown on them. A lot of people are just face down on the pavement from these costs. And I heard your testimony, and I read through some of the ideas you have, and we appreciate those ideas. But I think there has to be, from you and from manufacturers, a sense of urgency about this. Not just ideas thrown around, but a sense of urgency in what you can do more. And that leads me to Medicaid, which is, you all are familiar with the program, but maybe not until 2017 were enough Americans familiar with the program, and certainly politicians weren't. But politicians found out in 2017 that Medicaid is an us program, not a them program. They found out that in a state like mine, Pennsylvania, 40% of the kids benefit from Medicaid, roughly. Approximately half the people with disabilities benefit, and more than 60% of the people in my state who happen to be over the age of 65 benefit from Medicaid. Seniors, kids, and people with disabilities. And that program is being decimated before our eyes, or at least attempts are made to do it. And another thing we need your help on is to speak up when proposals are made here. There's a House Republican budget proposal voted on the House Budget Committee that would cut Medicaid by more than $1.5 trillion. The administration just days ago proposed another $1.5 trillion cut to Medicaid over 10 years. The silence on that side is deafening. I hope the silence in your boardrooms and from your companies is not deafening. We need your help on this. We need your help to fight against these kinds of cuts. It'll hurt Americans who are very vulnerable, but it'll also hurt each of you in your own way. This question we'll do very quickly because you've already answered it, but I want to hear it again. One of the things that Senator Menendez raised was so-called spread pricing contract behavior, in which pharmacy benefit managers mark up the difference between how much they reimburse pharmacies and the amount they charge the plan sponsor. I want to ask each of you, have you engaged in that practice? And number one, and number two, if you haven't, does your company plan to do anything to make sure that you never engage in that process? I'll start with Dr. Miller and go down, and you can amplify it in written form because we're running out of time.
Yes. So in limited cases, we do engage in spread pricing. We give our clients the options of how they want to reimburse us, and that's one of the options available to them.
Mr. Rice?
Senator, it is an option that we do provide to our clients in terms of how they want to engage in remuneration.
Senator, we're an integrated health plan. For our Medicare members, no. For Medicaid, no. For our fully insured commercial, no. It's available on a limited basis for our self-funded population, which is about 200,000 members, and it's client choice.
Senator, we do not engage in that in the Medicare program. In the Medicaid program, it's client choice about how they want to contract and pay for our services in the commercial market. It's also client choice around how they want to pay. Usually each client in the commercial market asks for a bid with it and without it, and it's a client choice about how they want to pay for our services.
So, Senator, our business model is transparent and pass through. With our clients, our model is not to engage in spread pricing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Are the pharmacy benefit managers the most formidable force that the pharmaceutical industry faces in terms of bringing its pricing down? Somebody's going to answer that, right?
Senator, I would say competition would be the other force that heavily influences.
But as an institution, you guys are organized, you have a lot of expertise on your side, and you tangle with the pharmaceutical industry to bring rebates that then go through to your clients, who are mostly insurers, and that ends up supporting clients. That's kind of the theory of the case, isn't it? Yes?
Yes, Senator.
Yes. So let me, two quick numbers here. The pharmaceutical industry last year declared $27.5 million in lobbying, and the individual drug companies added another $194 million for a total of $221.5 million in lobbying by the pharmaceutical industry, which, as a general proposition, if you want to understand what's wrong with Congress, just ask about one industry that does $220 million in lobbying in 1 year. So that's one figure, the $220+ million in lobbying. The other is that out of $480 billion that the U.S. spends on drugs, my figures are that $323 billion of that goes to the pharmaceutical industry and $23 billion of it goes to you. So that makes you 7% of what the pharmaceutical industry gets and 5% of the total spending. So if we whacked you in half, that would affect prices by 3.5%. Fair math? So it's got to be interesting to you all to witness how the pharmaceutical industry has been able to take pressure on their pricing and turn it into, with political jujitsu of an almost magical variety, pressure on their greatest adversary, the most powerful force for pushing prices down. So I hope that you at least respect what they've been able to pull off here. That's quite a trick on their part. You don't decide where the rebate goes when you send it through to your client, do you?
No.
No. Do some of you have state Medicaid programs as your clients?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Through some of our health plans, correct.
Okay, indirectly then,
Yes.
but 4 yeses and 1 indirectly. And presumably those state Medicaid plans have the same rights as your other clients to audit and look into your methodology and your cost and your rebate structure.
So, Senator, just to clarify, my answer was also an indirect yes.
Got it.
But yes, our direct
With respect
clients,
to my question, can any state Medicaid program look at your books as a client?
our clients have extensive audit rights in our business, and their clients have audit rights into our business. Correct.
Great. So the state Medicaid programs do have audit rights into your business.
Correct.
True for all 5 of you?
Indirectly, yes.
Directly or indirectly?
Senator, I might add that in the primary state where we have Medicaid business, the state does its own rebates and formulary.
Yeah. And there is legislation pending to provide transparency into your business model, both to MedPAC and to MacPAC, who would then be in a position to provide expert advice to Congress on whether there were problems with
the industry and things that we should address without having to divulge every part of your business. By the way, I would support full transparency, but this isn't my hearing, this is your hearing. So one by one, do each of you support or oppose the legislation that would give MedPAC and MacPAC the ability to examine your business model and report to Congress?
Support.
Support?
Support.
Support?
Senator, we're neutral on that.
Okay. No opposition?
No opposition.
Even through your lobby groups?
Right.
Because sometimes people say they have no opposition, and then they send their lobbyists out the opposite.
We support it if kept confidential.
Okay.
If the data is kept confidential.
Yeah, but the advice to us can be, you need to look at this, this, and this, and you understand that. There's an advice to Congress function in that.
Right, as long as the data is kept confidential.
Got it.
We support.
Support. Okay. Well, let's hope we can at least get that piece of legislation moving, which I think would be very helpful, and I think a considerable number of members of this committee support. And then we'll keep looking. But I guess my point is, I appreciate the scrutiny of the PBMs, but let's not go away without remembering that they are $23 billion out of a $480 billion problem. And just as somebody who sees a lot of this around here, I stand in awe of the pharmaceutical industry's jujitsu magic to have gotten their prime antagonists to become the focus of the problem with, by my count, 460, do the math right here, $457 billion remaining to be looked at. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman recognizes himself for sometimes questions. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thanks for a very long morning to be able to go through this kind of dialogue. There are a lot of questions that you've peppered through over the course of the day. Let me bring up some specifics that maybe we haven't dealt with already. The administration has put out a point of sale effort for the DIR fees. Does anyone here have a problem with what the administration has put out so far as a recommendation for how to do a point of sale effort for DIRs?
Are you talking about the point of sale rebate? That
Yes.
Yeah. So we really support the sentiment. We believe that lowering costs at the counter is really crucial to patients. However, I'm not convinced that this mechanism is going to be very successful. A couple things. One is it shifts costs to the taxpayer. CMS auditors have estimated that to be about $196 billion over the next 10 years. Second is many patients, it will pay down their copay, so they'll get stuck on a branded product instead of switching to a generic that is equally effective and therefore continuing to cause high costs. Third is that when you make the rebates publicly known, it will make our ability to negotiate deeper discounts that much less effective, and so you won't get as effective discounts. And so you'll decrease our negotiations. You'll take the pressure off of pharmaceutical companies. You'll raise the premium for 100% of the beneficiaries while only helping a minority of the beneficiaries. And so we believe while the intent is really good, there are targeted ways to achieve the same thing without these problems.
What would that be?
So one of the things we did is if you look at the categories of drugs that are creating the pain for the patients at the pharmacy counter, they fall into several buckets. It's diabetic agents, it's hepatitis C, it's asthma. Those are the ones that actually, if you had a targeted solution for those, you would actually relieve most of the patients that have the problem. If you think about patients with cancer who have an enormous burden at the counter, because there are no rebates in those products, they don't benefit at all from moving the rebate to the point of sale.
Right. Does anyone have any other feedback on that, on both the administration's recommendation or responses to it?
Yes, Senator. We are absolutely supportive of the administration's goal of reducing out-of-pocket costs for seniors and lowering overall health care costs. We, too, when we look at the proposed rule, have a few concerns where there may be elements of it that would drive costs higher, actually not lower. The types of solutions that we would put forward are, again, point-of-sale rebates as an option, and we were the first Med D plan to provide that option in 2019 for seniors who want to sign up. In addition to that, we would also be very supportive of preventive drug lists with $0 copays. again, as another means of reducing the out-of-pocket burden for seniors that we're all worried about.
So let me switch subjects on this a little bit. When I talk to independent pharmacies, they'll talk about the DIR fees 100% of the time and clawbacks. They are a standalone rural pharmacy, and there are two issues that come up. Let me deal with them in order. One of them is obviously they get a bill at some point for $50,000 that they're clawing back from something 6-7 months ago before, and they didn't know that was coming back. Obviously, cash flow becomes exceptionally difficult on that. They will reference that there are performance metrics put on them, but I can never hear what those performance metrics are. Can anyone give me an example of what performance metrics might be for an independent pharmacy to avoid the clawbacks?
Senator, I'm a pharmacist. Forever, pharmacists have wanted to be paid for cognitive services, to be paid to be at the top of the license.
I'm limited on time, but I understand for the cognitive part of it.
Yes, sir. So the example of performance fees that we put in place to get the pharmacist engaged are things that will help the patient with drug adherence, identify those patients who are not as adherent, engage with them. And through these programs, we've seen a 2 percentage point increase in drug adherence in several disease states year over year over year because of getting the pharmacists engaged in a value-based conversation, just like we ask doctors in hospitals.
Right. Any other examples of metrics? Are those proprietary, the metrics that go out to independent pharmacies? No, they're not.
Senator, no.
Okay, we'll kind of walk through that somewhat. I have had several independent pharmacists that have said to me they'll have a particularly large requirement for a DIR fee clawback, and within 2 weeks after that big check comes in, they'll get a phone call from a PBM that also owns pharmacies that will say, how are things going? Would you consider selling to us? They find those things strangely coincidental, that they have a big check for a clawback and then a phone call to say, are you interested in being able to sell back to us? Now, I would certainly hope those two are not aligned, but that is a concern that they have that is expressed. I can't be the first person that's expressed that to anyone here. Let me express one thing, because I don't expect us to be able to answer that without knowing the specifics on the location. Do you ever negotiate a higher list price for a drug to give you more flexibility on the rebate side? Is there a time when you work with a manufacturer to negotiate a higher list price to give you more flexibility? And have each of you answer that.
No. No.
No.
No. No.
Do any of you ever, when a generic comes available, do you put the formulary, the generic on a formulary with the branded group? So there's branded tiers, generic tiers and such, where the generic would enter the formulary in a branded tier. Does that happen with you at all on the pricing?
I would have to, because of the basis of the large number of drugs, I'd have to get back to you if there's any specific example, but that would not be our practice.
Okay. Mr. Ross.
Senator, our focus is providing the lowest cost option.
So the generics would not be on a branded tier?
If it's the lowest cost option.
Senator, I can think of limited circumstances, very rare where that's the case, usually because of the 6-month exclusivity rule when a generic hits the market.
Senator, our objective is around lowest net cost for drugs and what tier it goes on, but in terms of I'm not sure if there's be examples where that might occur, but it would be rare.
Okay.
Senator, I can't think of a specific example, but our model would be to prefer the lowest net cost drug.
To the consumer?
To the plan.
Okay.
For the benefit of the member.
Okay. Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Senator Langford, and I also note the chairman of the committee, Senator Grassley, is here, and he was kind enough.
Let me thank Senator Langford for taking over for me while I met with the Iowa hospital people.
And I want to thank Chairman Grassley as well for being able to ask this extra question. So, gentlemen, a couple of hours ago, I said the whole system, drug companies, middlemen, insurance companies, the citizen thinks this is all one big scam. It's a ripoff. They're all scratching each other's back and trying to keep the prices up, and everybody's blaming each other.
My own view is, and I've talked to the chairman about this, is every sector of American healthcare has got to bring more value and lower prices. In other words, you got to get beyond the blame game. Now, for 2 hours, you heard from both sides of the dais, Democratic side and the Republican side, that there are not a lot of people up here on this side of the dais holding rallies for spread pricing. Okay? And the reason why you heard from Democrats and Republicans is that spread pricing is a ripoff, plain and simple. When a PBM pays a set price to a pharmacy, and then the PBM turns around and charges Medicare and Medicaid many times more for that prescription, that is plain old price gouging. So I just want to ask a question and want to hear you answer it in a yes or no fashion. If the Congress proposes to ban spread pricing in Medicare and Medicaid, will you oppose it? Let's go right down the road. This is just a yes or no.
We look forward to working with you on it.
Yes or no? Are you going to support, if Congress proposes a ban on spread pricing, Medicare and Medicaid, yes or no? Will you oppose it?
If that becomes the market standard, we are supportive.
Yes.
100% support. We always have, always will.
Good. Making some headway. Going to save taxpayers some money. Sir?
We don't do spread pricing in Medicare, and it's the choice of the client on the concern.
Will you oppose it if we propose in Medicare and Medicaid outlawing it? That's a yes or no.
We're probably neutral.
Okay.
We would not oppose.
Great. So out of the 5 of you, we got 3 that will be with us if we propose getting rid of spread pricing in Medicare and Medicaid. And we got 1 neutral and 1 I'm just going to scratch my head about a little bit and try to figure it out. Gentlemen, you heard from Democrats and Republicans.
Senator, I want to make sure we're clear. I was saying yes, we would support
the ban.
Yes.
Yeah, there are 5 of you. On the whistle, we haven't even talked about Kentucky yet. So I'm leaving here saying I got 60% of you to say we're going to protect taxpayers. We got a lot more to do, and I want you to know that everybody in this, the drug companies, the middlemen, yourselves, the other players have got to be part of it, the insurers. So I hope that we'll keep the record open. I hope all of you are going to join me in saying we ought to ban spread pricing in Medicare and Medicaid. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the chance to get into an additional area.
Thank you very much. First of all, I thank you for your attendance. Thank you for the preparation. I assume you had to put a lot of preparation in it, even though you know your business well. We thank you for that. You know the inside, and you know that I've said it's kind of an opaque business, and we need more transparency and all that. So you've helped us considerably on that, and I assume that we'll be back to you, or we'll be hearing from you as we progress. I hope you'll cooperate with us. I know you will, so I don't have any questions about that. I'm going to ask all the members to, if you got questions in writing for these 5 witnesses, Tuesday, April the 23rd is the deadline for that, and then in turn, the extent to which you have to respond to those, I hope you can do it as soon as possible. With that, this hearing is adjourned, and thanks everybody for attending.